And Chris Bowen is now back in the country, and since then, of course, since he returned home, the Greens have expressed their absolute delight with the decision that the government, they say, has taken to release asylum seekers into the community, but it's a decision that hasn't yet been announced. Here's Sarah Hanson-Young.
It's wonderful to see the Minister moving. It's wonderful to see the government moving on this. But now what we need to make sure is that we get the legislative reforms as well. So it's not just at the goodwill of a good minister. I hope the opposition do support the amendment to the Migration Act, as to the government. For far too long, this issue has been played out as a partisan issue, a political football game.
So she effectively made the announcement on AM on Saturday morning. As Tony Abbott says, Labor's in government, the Greens are in power, they're making the announcements.
Well, she's flagged the announcement, yeah, and you couldn't imagine that would have occasioned too much celebration within the government. And as far as I know, we have no indication from the government as yet as to whether that's correct, and if so, when it's going to be announced. Look, I think that over the election period, the story that the government told about asylum seekers and immigration was very much hampered by this sort of deep fear that the Labor Party has about this issue, and I think that that's why you saw just quite a messy array of public statements and you know, a not quite honest, I think, it's at most times, approach to this portfolio area. I mean, Chris Bowen is new in the portfolio. If he is about to make an announcement, then that'll occasion a whole new round of...
Gerard, what do you expect here? Will it go beyond simply children in detention?
Well, firstly, I think it's very unprofessional behaviour for the Senator to make those comments. If you're going to have private discussions with the government, they should remain private. An announcement should come from the government. I don't know what the government is contemplating, but it is possible that they are looking at releasing children and their parents, where there are parents to the children, into the community pending determination of their claims. There's no evidence to suggest that everyone would be released, and that would be contrary to what the government's policy appears to be. So that may be what the government has in mind. I don't know, but it's certainly... I doubt that what the government has in mind is what the Green Senator says has in mind.
Whenever this has come up in the past, there's been a lot of support for releasing kids from detention, and yet still we wait an announcement.
Well, I mean, officially, the Labor Party has never withdrawn the fresh policies that it brought in 2 or 3 years ago, which was that, you know, kids were not to be held in detention. Now, that was always rather a farce, because they were effectively held in detention on Christmas Island, because there simply isn't much of a community there to release them into. I'm very puzzled by this. It's not been contradicted, so obviously there is some move on, and it would be very good to see Australia joining the rest of the civilised world in not holding children and their families in detention while refugee outcomes are determined.
With your experience on Christmas Island, I mean, getting kids out of detention or quasi-detention on Christmas Island would effectively mean getting them off Christmas Island, wouldn't it?
Well, apart from... There was room in the community on Christmas Island. There are only about the residents of Christmas Island number about 1,500. There's room in the community there for about 30 or 40 people to be released into the community. All the rest were in this horrible donga camp up on the top of a mountain outside the town. And while the staff were doing absolutely everything in their power to make life reasonable for these people, it was not a community, and the claims that it was dreadful fib, really.
What would be the politics of this then, if say, this idea is embraced, certainly by those left of centre, but a lot of others as well, and they say, well, we're happy with the government, they've done that, or would they say, and therefore they'd be less inclined to vote for the Greens in a protest vote, or would they say, no, the Greens have encouraged this, it's a positive sign, and it simply demonstrates we need to have Greens in an alliance with the government?
Well, the politics of this are just incredibly complicated because Australia's Australia's fear of boat people is so strong and has never truly been contested by the principal political leaders of the country. The numbers are small, we know all that, not going to go through that again. But to release into the community, it would be capable if the opposition wished to do so. And the opposition has been harder liner, more brutal in their arguments against refugees than even really Howard was in many ways. I would see this would be a very nasty political train crash.
But it should be remembered, after John Howard changed his harsh policy and after the 2004 election, children were released in the community, and many asylum seekers were released into the community. And what's happened is that because of the recent surge over the last couple of years, you've got a situation where children in detention because they're with their parents, and it's very hard to put children out unless you put their parents, at least one parent and probably two parents with them. So all this government is proposing to do is probably not all that different to what John Howard's government did around 2006, 2007.
And then the opposition is saying, well, you do this, but then keep in mind you'll only encourage asylum seekers to bring their kids on that dangerous journey.
Which is a legitimate fear.
Well, that's a reasonable point.
Nobody wants to provide an incentive for people to, if they're deciding whether or not to bring a child along, to bring a child and subject that child to danger. I mean, this is the diabolical element of this whole
I think it's why I'd acknowledge that this was best handled in the Fraser years, Malcolm Fraser's years. But in Malcolm Fraser's years, only 2,000 people came by boat. All the others were processed offshore, and they all came in on aircraft with valid visas. Now, I think what this government would probably like to do is something like that, where everyone gets processed offshore or as close to offshore as possible. That's what they're trying to do.
They may get this
centre up in East Timor. It's possible.